Here's the smoke render, and this just came from EmberGen after bringing in our exported camera, so the camera track matches what the smoke is doing. And this is basically just a simple render of a smoke fluid, and what all I really did to it is I matched the blacks on it, so the blacks actually match the footage of our background here. So just to see this in place, let's just do it like this. I'm going to actually disable all of these so we can step through it one quick thing at a time. So here is the footage of the smoke where it was placed in the EmberGen 3D scene with the camera we brought in. I matched the blacks, which again is something that we could do in our digital compositing class together, and it also boosted up a lot of that sunset. And the reason why I actually went to EmberGen is I originally had smoke that was brought in from just stock elements. And the stock elements basically look like this. It was a variation of stock elements of smoke, but it had a little bit more of a drift to it for wind or whatever. And yeah, it looks great, and it actually has a nice scale to it, much further away than the smoke I'm using. My smoke is kind of a lot more closer to the camera. But one thing that you really can't play around with all that much is playing around with the interactive lighting of these elements, right? And I wanted to have a nice sunset feel. And even playing around with like distortion maps or normal maps, I converted this into normal maps, and that didn't really look very good. Or ramps, that was like sunset on one side to shadow on the other. None of that really looked very good. So the big reason I basically went into these smoke elements here for real smoke elements rendered was simply because, I just didn't like the fact that none of them looked like smoke that was going on with a harsh sunset. And I really wanted that kind of rim light going on. So that's why I went for the actual Fluid Sim 3D route on that, instead of just sticking with stock elements that you really can't control much with lighting. Apart from that, it's basically color corrections. I desaturated it. I did a hue shift on it to kind of match more of our environment. I did a slight defocus because it's slightly defocused back there. And one of the things you always want to do, of course, in a comp is try and match the defocus on the same elements that are in the depth plane of what you're comping in. I pre-multed it back together after color correcting it. Now again, that's another big thing that I wish After Effects would start incorporating is unpremult and premult, because long story short, if you color correct pre-multiplied footage with alpha channels, you're going to get weird fringing and dark haloing and all kinds of stuff. So you really need to have that ability to kind of rip the alpha channel away from a render with an alpha, of RGB information. Do your color correction, and then throw that alpha channel right back on top. And that's basically the entire concept of unpremult, color correction, premult. And you never really want to color correct without doing that. After Effects really doesn't give you that opportunity to do that. Then I clamped that down as well, because I was getting some funny readings in the blacks. And then of course I added the lens distortion back in, which kind of looks like this. This is the after, here's the before. You see that slight difference right there? And that came, of course, where did I get that? It came from the actual track of the footage. It undistorted the lens for me when it decided, what kind of lens I was using. If it decided when it tracked this, it said, hey, it looks like you're using a focal length of 29.47 on that. So that actually distorts everything near the edges of the screen. Of course, in any 3D program, lens distortion is not incorporated because all the cameras, the 3D cameras, have like a perfectly flat lens. So what you're going to want to do is reincorporate that lens distortion back into your 3D render so it matches the plate. That's kind of a pretty important step to make sure that that kind of lines up. The other smoke I added as well. There's the other smoke. And of course, just some of these models that I just grabbed off like CG Trader for like 10 bucks. There was like really nothing to these models, and I knew it was going to be far away and it was going to be defocused, and I wanted them thrown back there because kind of what I'm going for here is like a nuclear disaster where, something happened at the plant, things are on fire, there's ash kind of raining down, and basically everybody that worked there is now an undead zombie, right? Who knows? But these things were just kind of rendered with the HDRI is really all I did. Cost a couple bucks just to throw them in because I didn't have time to do any of the modeling and look dev myself. Matching the blacks again, desaturating it, pre-multiplying it, adding a little defocus. Again, there's our lens distortion. There it is on these far away elements. There we go. and then we throw it right into the comp. And you notice that there's some white fringing around my matte. And I'll show you how we kind of got rid of that a little bit later. You know, the easiest thing to do if you have a really kind of a crappy key on some background footage, throw another tree in front of it. That's like the simplest thing to do. Just find another tree that matches these and throw another CG tree right on top of it. Odds are nobody will even notice, right? I didn't do that, but you'll see how I kind of take care of a problem later on in a quick and dirty way. So that's basically a lot of the background elements right there. So that's basically how I threw my background elements in, something like that. And now we'll talk a little bit more about adding some of the other stuff as we go through, including, of course, our skeleton army.